can.
I think I'm going to put my name in mine, because I have a feeling we might mix them up sometimes.
Okay, welcome to our RCA, and we'll videotape these in case there's folks that would like to watch them at home and not have to come out, or if the weather's bad in the future. But if they have a concern about the pandemic and catching the virus, we can always have it on our website then, and that'll be going to the RCIA CCB page, and then just come down to the bottom, and that's where the RCA videos will be. So the CCB, like the e-learnings for the kids that we did last year, we'll have a few of those this year as well, but that'll be at the higher end of the page on the CCB program. And we'll try to get the handouts as a PDF file that's right on the side of the web page, so that the people can just print those out at home if they like, and follow along with the video then, okay? And today's the Feast of St. Matthew, the Apostle, September 21st, and so the Gospel was, it's the very short Gospel, just the calling of St. Matthew, so I brought the Caravaggio painting over of Caravaggio's oil painting of the verses of the calling of St. Matthew. But I thought for our opening prayer, what we do is just read last Sunday's Gospel and go from there, from Mark chapter 9, verse 30 through 37. So we'll do that as our opening prayer, is read the Gospel, and then that'll, I think, it will get us into our RCA program just fine as a nice introduction. If you want to please stand, if you can, we'll just recite the Gospel. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
They left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. Jesus was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death he will rise." But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent, and they had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. And then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all, and the servant of all." And taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You be seated then. So that was our Gospel this Sunday. And I think for what we did was, since Sunday was the 19th of the month, and that's an anniversary of St. Joseph during this year of St. Joseph, his feast day, remember, is March 19th. And so we just talked about obtaining a plenary indulgence for the souls in purgatory. You know, I wanted to do that as the homily this Sunday, but I thought the reserve homily that I would have given, had it not fallen on the 19th, that was then what it kind of fits in with our RCA program then. And so we'll go through, like you see on your handout, there's the who, what, how, when, and why of our knowledge of God. We'll go through that, but we'll just show you how this Gospel, chapter 9 in Mark's Gospel, kind of fleshes those questions out. And so Jesus is here, he's teaching the greatest truth that there is to the disciples. And that's why the disciples don't understand what he's talking about, is here it is, you know, God is saying how the Son of Man has been sent to earth, and he'll be handing over his life to men, and they will kill him, and then 3 days after his death he will rise. So he's talking about his passion and his resurrection, the Paschal mystery here. And, you know, how do you rise from the dead? You know, this is an impossibility, and so that's why the disciples don't understand what's happening. But that's the purpose of God coming to earth as man, is to explain God's view of the salvation history of man then. How it is that man will regain his innocence, be freed from his sins, and re-enter into the Father's kingdom. It'll all happen through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, huh? And so they don't understand this. They're afraid to ask any questions about it. But it's the same thing with the calling of St. Matthew then. In the Caravaggio image, they have the Christ figure, and I'll just zoom it in for our people that are watching the video. So Caravaggio just takes the verses from Matthew's Gospel. I think it's in chapter 9 of Matthew's Gospel, and it's only like 4 verses long of how Jesus walked by and went into the customs post, and he just came in and said to Matthew, "Follow me." And Matthew got up, was the tax collector, and just followed Jesus and became one of the 12. And so in the image that Caravaggio paints, the Christ figure is here, and the figure of St. Peter's in front of him. And then you have the hand of Christ beckoning, pointing to Matthew, who's the middle of the 5 men there. So there's the 2 Roman soldiers that are guarding the customs post in Matthew's depiction. They're between Christ and Matthew. And then there's 2 fellow tax collectors on the far left of the image, totally absorbed in the counting of the money. And Matthew is, it's that beautiful image of the shock on his face when he finds out that God is calling him to be a disciple. Here he is, the most detestable man in all of Galilee, a tax collector that's confiding with the Romans, and here it is that Jesus wants him to be one of his disciples. And Caravaggio has so much imagery in the painting. The hand that Christ beckons Matthew with is the hand of Adam that Michelangelo paints on the Sistine Chapel ceiling with the creation of man, where Adam has his hand out and God is reaching to touch him to bring him to life. And so that image that Jesus is the perfect Adam, or the perfect man, and he's come to give that perfection back to each one of us, and he's giving it one person at a time, and that's that image of the plenary indulgence that we work. We can only work one indulgence per Eucharist that we receive, So we save people the same way that Christ did, one at a time, And that's the beauty, and we'll get into it later on in our talk tonight, especially when we go through Pope Benedict's Reader book, about how there's something special about each person that's been created uniquely by God. Each one of us called to be a son and a daughter of God then. And so, Matthew, and using the mirror image with his hand and pointing to himself, can't believe that God is calling him to be a disciple, But that's the truth, that God calls all of us to follow him, right?
Quick question. Could you write Caravaggio and the name of the painting down? Or do you know it?
Yeah. I always put, I think it's just 1 R and then 2 G's.
Cool.
So I'm like when it comes to spelling, I'm like the goose in Charlotte's Web. Remember, she said when they wanted to spell terrific for Wilbur, for Charlotte to weave into the web that Wilbur was terrific, she said, "Oh, that's a good word, but how do you spell it?" And so the goose says, and that's played by Agnes Moorehead, she's the voice for the cartoon figure, she says, T-double-E, double R, double R, double I, double F, double F, double I, double C. Double every letter, so I'm no good at spelling, I just double everything too. So, but I think it's only 1 R and 2 G's, but it might be the opposite. So Caravaggio, I'm painting this, and the subtlety of the painting is that the Christ is calling us, and between Jesus and Matthew is the cross. And so in the symbol of the window, you see the open window here, and you can see the cross that's there. And so every vocation, whether it's to single, married, or religious life, it's a call to die on a cross and to sacrifice our life. And here, isn't that what Jesus is talking about in Mark chapter 9 in our Gospel? He's talking about how he'll give up his life and be raised from the dead on the 3rd day. That's the greatest truth, that God will lay down his life for our sinful humanity. And he'll call each one of us, and he is calling the 12 in the story that we read on Sunday, he is calling the 12 to give up their lives. And so we know that Matthew, as well as Peter, almost all of the disciples will be martyred for their faith. And so if it meant that other people would come into the glory of heaven, that they would give up their life, if that would happen, you know, that's what Jesus is calling us to. This greatest truth is how we're supposed to, the man that would try to save his life will lose it. But the man that loses his life for the sake of others will find it in heaven. A married couple, they both get to heaven because they sacrifice their life for the other. You know, a single person gets to heaven by sacrificing his life for other people. And a priest gets to heaven the same way, by assuming the cross of the priesthood and dying so that other people can gain entrance into the glory of heaven. And so the disciples, what are they arguing about while Jesus is trying to teach them this greatest truth? You know, they're arguing about who's the greatest, you know, who's the number one of the 12. And it's just the exact opposite of what Jesus is trying to teach them. And so then he says, that's why he says, you know, he that wishes to be first shall be the last of all and the servant of all. You know, that's this message of Jesus Christ. But the disciples weren't listening to the message of self-sacrifice and for the sake of bringing others to God. And so what does Jesus do then? He uses the example of bringing a child and placing it in their midst. And so this image, this image that a child is the lowest person in the Jewish cultural scheme of things. He puts this child in their midst, and it's this image that I know we've all heard it, that you know, children are to be seen and not heard. Children are to do what their parents tell them to do. And that's the purpose that the Christ uses the child as an example to the disciples. You know, the child is commandable, if that's a word. You know, and especially the child is answerable to his mom and dad. He does whatever his mom and dad tells him to do. And that's the image that the Christ wants of his disciples. Will you do what I ask of you? I'm going to show you how to do it. I'll show you how to give up your life for others. But will you do that? Will you give up your life for other people? Huh? And he's trying to let go of the silliness of self and trying to get ahead. You know, a child, one of the characteristics of a child, if he's commandable, is also that a child is always caught up in the moment or in the present. You know, a child doesn't worry so much about the past, and the child's never thinking of the future, right? The child is just thinking about the present situation. And how many times do we see in movies and things, somebody's at a show or something, and they're not enjoying the show because they're thinking of what they're going to be doing afterwards. And we're the same way, right? It's this childness of, we try to get the CCD kids to come at 9:15 in the morning, and then the classes go till 10:15 on Sunday, so that, what can they do? They can go over to the 10:30 Mass, right? But, so that's that moment of living in the present, of coming from one joy of learning about your faith, and then come into the Mass and to watch or witness the practice of that faith by your seniors or your mom and dad, the people that are ahead of you in their growth in holiness, hopefully. Just to be caught up in the Mass with that Paschal mystery going on that they just learned about, hopefully, in their CCD class. And so there's all of the saints will talk about the joy of just being in the present moment and experiencing what it is God wants you to experience, and giving yourself to others that are around you right there and then at that moment of the day. We think about Mother Teresa, who we went through Lent with last year. Just Mother Teresa, giving all of her attention to the person that's right in front of her and how to serve that one person, and not worrying about who she's going to have to serve tomorrow or who she served the day before, but just giving all of herself in that present moment to the person that she's serving in the name of Christ. And when Mother Teresa tried to explain the joy that she felt about that, of how, to serve others was a joy. She's being like this child, caught up in the present and giving oneself to the present moment. And when you come to Mass then, to just be caught up in that mystery that Jesus Christ is undergoing the Passion right there before our eyes. He's dying on the cross. He's rising from the dead right before our eyes at every Mass. We witness that Paschal mystery. And so we're called to be caught up in that present moment of the Mass when God shows us this greatest truth, which is called the Paschal mystery then. And so one of the things that they train a priest in seminary, at least the seminary that I went to, and the formators that I had, was they trained a priest to impart his spirituality to the parishioners that he will have. And so remember that one little parable that Jesus tells about the different towns, and there's the one town, they were like lukewarm water. They weren't hot, they weren't cold, they were lukewarm. And so what did Jesus do? He says, I spit you out, I spew you out. Because you're not hot, because you're not cold, because you're just in the middle, bland, I spit you out. You're not living the faith of Jesus Christ. You can't, when God comes to us and presents the plan of God for salvation, you're either all in for it or you're all against it. There's nobody that can be ambivalent towards it or be on the fence. You either have to buy it hook, line, and sinker or reject it totally. And that's the people that Jesus will spew out at the end of time that won't make it into the kingdom are those that they could take or leave the faith that Jesus offered to them. That he actually died for them personally on Calvary. And so a priest's job is really, I never worry about parishioners that are strong in their faith and they're practicing a spirituality and they have their favorite sacramentals and they're already practicing them. I don't worry about those people. And even if their spirituality is different than mine, as long as they're living some spirituality and it's okayed or agreed upon by the Catholic Church, that spirituality that they're living out, I don't worry about them. But what I worry about is the person that they don't have a spirituality. They don't have a prayer life at home. They don't have devotions that they practice outside of the Sunday Mass that keep them going through the week. The people that would come to Mass on Sunday that I worry about are the ones that, well, I came this Sunday because, it's not the harvest time of the year, or it's not the planting time of the year, or I wasn't busy at work, and so I got enough sleep on Friday night into Saturday. I didn't need to sleep in on Sunday morning, so I came to Mass. That type of person, that's the one that the priest worries about, because he's lukewarm in his faith. Those are going to be the ones that are spewed out at the end of time. And Jesus says, I came to you, I laid down my life for you, and you didn't accept that. And so that's why we have so many sacramentals that we give out and things at our parishes. I'm just using these things as fishing lines or bait to see which you like, which one will captivate your imagination, and which one will spark your prayer life with God to make you want to engage in that sacramental and talk to God on a regular basis, hopefully a daily basis then. And I want you desiring that Eucharist all the time, and that you can't live your life without it. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. And so that's the same thing, the same message that Jesus has in that gospel today. So it's all that, just those few verses that we read, that it's almost like the encapsulation of the spirituality of a priest and what he's trying to do with his parishioners and things. And that's what we're trying to do with RCA as well. Is that, and then we can go into our who, what, how, when, and why of our knowledge on God. So if you go to the top of your handout there, there's these 5 questions that we can use to spark what it is that we're trying to learn about God. So I always remember my brother had a bedspread on his bed growing up. It was Peanuts characters from the Charles Schulz era. And so it was just like diamond shapes of material, and each one would have a different character. So Snoopy would be in one diamond, and Charlie Brown would be another. Linus was in one. And Linus's diamond had him saying the fact, to know me is to love me. And we always thought that's kind of sissy, for Linus. Lucy had something like, I'm going to knock your block off or something like Charlie Brown or something like that. And, Charlie Brown was good grief or something. But Linus says, to know me is to love me. And that's the purpose, that the Christ comes, he introduces himself to us in each a unique way, but the Christ is asking you, will you fall in love with me like I've fallen in love with you? And the more we know about Jesus Christ, the more we know about God, the more we can't help but fall in love with him. You see that? And I think every married couple knows that. When you ask people that have been married, 25, 30, 45, 50 years, and people will say, how did you two ever get married? You don't seem like you would be like the two that would go together. And it's to everybody else, it's a mystery how that man and that woman got together or stayed together that long. And it's because the longer that the couple is together, the more they know about each other, the more special that love becomes. They're growing in their love for the person every day, and the marriage is becoming stronger with each passing day. And that's the trouble with marriages when they're first starting out, is there's so many difficulties, and you're trying to get to know this person better, and you thought you knew something about them, and it turns out not to be correct at all as you get exposure to the person. And problems come up, and then you don't stick through the problems together or seek to learn more about why this person reacted this way in this situation. But if you did stay through those difficult times and you learned more about this person, you would naturally fall more in love with them. Because to know somebody is to fall in love with them. Because we were each created in love. God had a spark of love in himself that he had to make you. And he had to make you the way you are. Right? And he loves you just for being the person that he created you to be. Even though we're sinners. He realizes that he's in love with the essence or the being of each individual person then. Okay? So, our first question, who actually benefits from your knowledge of the Catholic faith? Well, if a person has a tremendous knowledge of his Catholic faith, who benefits from that? Everybody that the person comes in contact with. His spouse, his family, his co-workers, even the people that he meets on the street will be influenced by the knowledge of your faith that you have. And so the whole world actually benefits from you taking RCIA classes. The whole world benefits every time a young person goes to CCD class. The whole world benefits every time you receive the Eucharist or one of the sacraments of the Catholic Church. Because as you grow in your knowledge of the Catholic faith, you're falling more in love with God, and that relationship that you have with God is going to influence the relationship that you have with everyone else. Because as soon as you realize who God is and you've fallen in love with him, God's going to turn the table right quick and ask you to go and love this other person. What's the great commandment? Love God and neighbor. Huh? So once you fall in love with God, God's going to ask you, will you fall in love with your neighbor? See that? So who benefits from your knowledge of being here tonight? Everyone that you meet tomorrow will benefit from your coming to RCA tonight if you learn something about God during the RCA class. Okay? See that? What can happen to a person's heart? if they accumulate a critical volume of knowledge about Jesus Christ. So I put down there that critical amount because it's different for everyone. Some people, they only need to learn a certain amount about their relationship with God, and that's all it takes. Other people, you have to, in a sense, God has to reconvince them almost every day of His love for them. But it's a critical amount that's different for everyone. But as soon as you realize how much Jesus loves you, then it's like a nuclear reaction. Your heart ignites in its love for God. And remember, that was the wish of our Lord. Remember, He said, I've come to set the earth on fire. And how I wish it was already ablaze, right? Again, that lukewarmness, there was plenty of that. There was plenty of dry brush and kindling that was out there, but there wasn't a fire. There's all this potential, but the man had lost his desire to love God and to seek God at every turn. And so what's Jesus sent by the Father to do? Set the earth on fire. Have such a passionate love for the fellow man that they'll have a passionate love for me, your Heavenly Father. See that? So what happens when a person's heart finally gets enough knowledge, a critical volume of knowledge of Jesus? It turns on, it ignites in fire, and it seeks to do the will of God at every turn. Okay? So you fulfill that desire of Christ to set the world on fire. He wants to set your heart on fire. And how is it that the Catholic Church, where one worships God, can be influential on one's faith? So we have here, we have these three small towns of Sublette and West Brooklyn and Maytown, and they all have these giant churches. If you want to picture a church and it corresponds to the number of the population of the citizens or the parishioners that were there, these churches, be half the size or a quarter of the size of what they are. But for some reason, you've got these giant churches, and they're extremely beautiful. But even if your church was an old barn that got converted into a Catholic church, there's a beauty in the church that God has put you in specifically. And it's part of your spirituality to learn as much as you can about the unique spirituality that your church has, so that you could almost have a holy pride, I would say, and you can open the eyes of others that come into your church, open their eyes to the wonder of the beauty that your church has. I always remember when I was in Rome, there was these silly girls that was coming out of a Scavi tour, that tour that goes underneath it's 30 feet below the main altar in St. Peter's, where the bones of St. Peter are buried. You go through the old cemetery that's been buried underneath St. Peter's Basilica today. And I was coming out of one of those tours that I had given, and these girls were talking to the Swiss Guard. And the one girl runs back to her friends and she says, "Hey guys, you're not going to believe that was St. Peter's that we were in. They raided to St. Peter's Church, the biggest church in all of Christendom, and they didn't even know that was St. Peter's. They had to ask one of the Swiss guards, where's St. Peter's? And they're like, it's right there. You just were in it, So, the thing about St. Peter is so beautiful that if you don't focus on just one or two things when you go into St. Peter's, your eye gets flooded with so much beauty that you can walk out and not have remembered what you saw. But if you go in and you specifically go in to see a few things and to look for a few things and to understand a few things about the spirituality of the church, then you can really get a lot out of your visits to the church. You people, most of you have been coming to Our Lady Perpetual Help, or St. Mary the Assumption, West Brooklyn, or St. Patrick's in Maytown. You've been coming all your life to that church. And there's things in that church that you saw years ago that you haven't seen for a while, that people that come into the church just from Woodhaven, just to visit for a Sunday, they risk coming into our church and seeing its beauty but remembering nothing about it. And so part of the the how of catechesis is that you have to realize that your church, the place where you worship God, is so influential by the power of the Holy Spirit on how you live your faith. And it should be that you become like the docent or a tour guide of your church. So don't we have Larry Leffelman always, when they have the car show, you know, he has it where people can come in, he'll give them a little tour of the church. It should be that way with each one of us, that we would be able to take a stranger from another town or from Chicago and introduce them to the spirituality of our church right here in Sublette or Maytown or West Brooklyn or wherever it is. So some of our RCIA classes, it will get out of the primer book of Pope Benedict, or we'll use it in conjunction, and we'll actually go over to the church, or I'll have you meet out at Maytown's church one Tuesday night, or West Brooklyn's church one Tuesday night, and we'll just explore a little bit together some of the spirituality of these churches you have out here. They're so fantastically beautiful. You should have this pride that you're a member of this particular church. And that should be the case with anyone, no matter what church, what town you're in. Even if, like I said, if your church is an old converted barn, it has a spirituality, and that has an effect on how you learn your Catholic faith. Okay? The when, when is the best time to learn about your faith? We had, there was all kinds of, the diocese was all up in arms last year when the pandemic came out. What were we going to do with our CCD programs and RCA programs and things? And, we decided finally that we would go to e-learnings, and that we would learn from home using the computer and our website then, and our YouTube videos. But it was this image that not even a pandemic should stop us from wanting to learn more about our faith. What does St. Paul says that, what can prevent us from, what can separate us from the love of God? Can nakedness or peril or the sword? We would say not even a deadly virus should be able to prevent our ongoing catechesis. So whether we're a young person in CCD or we're older and we're in RCA classes, when's the best time to learn about your faith? Today, that present moment, that's the best time to learn about your faith. God's wanting to talk to you today and to explain more deeply His love for you. He doesn't want to wait for tomorrow to tell you He loves you today. Right? That's this tremendous lover. You think of the tremendous lovers in human history. They don't wait to proclaim their love for someone. Right? They do it in the present. Remember, that's where joy is. Joy is the present. Right? Okay? And why does the Catholic Church insist on providing catechesis for all of her citizens, both the young and the elderly? I would say that the young, they're too naive and they're too selfish, too self-centered, I guess, to really understand how great catechesis is and learning about the faith. They don't like school to begin with as a rule. They don't like learning as a rule to begin with. Older people, I think the older we get, the more cynical we get. And I think we have this attitude that we can't learn something new, whether it's about the faith or anything, that we know it all already. I think of Nathaniel in the Gospel. Remember, Philip comes to him and says, "We found the Messiah. Come and see." And Nathaniel asks the question, "Well, where's he from?" It's Jesus of Nazareth. He's the Messiah. And what does Nathaniel say? Can anything good come from Nazareth? There's this cynicism right away, this doubt that why of the 2 millennia that we've been looking for a Christ, why would he come now? And why would he come from Nazareth? And what's Philip's response? I don't know why, I just know that's the Messiah, right? Come and see. And then he doesn't say, Jesus barely says a few words to him, and he falls on his knees and he believes that he's the Messiah. And all Jesus said to him was, Nathaniel, I knew you when you were under the fig tree. And all of a sudden, Nathaniel's hook, line, and sinker, he's caught, right? And he knows that Jesus is the Messiah. So, why does the Catholic Church insist on providing catechesis for all of her citizens, both the young and the old? Because what if one of the boys that came to our CCD classes last Sunday, what if they grew up to be a priest? Just one of the boys that is in our CCD program. Think of the blessings that they'll bring to their family, their church community, their town. Think of the sacraments that they'll celebrate for the world. Even if they only celebrated one Mass or heard one confession, they absolve one person from their sins. That person is capable of entering into heaven. Right? Even if they only gave one person the Eucharist, it only takes one sampling of the Eucharist to become a saint. Right? What if one of the girls that was in our CCD program became a nun? And wouldn't the world be shocked that she gave herself in total commitment to the bridegroom, Jesus Christ? Right? And what if just one person that came to our RCIA program became Catholic, and what would happen to our town of Sublette or West Brooklyn and Maytown if we had another person who Jesus caught their heart on fire and they fell in love with God and they wanted to receive all the sacraments that they could? Right? So why does the Catholic Church insist on providing catechesis for all of her citizens, young and old, whether there's a pandemic or not? Because if just one person falls in love with God, that was worth it. Because remember, God created that universe around just that one person. Each one of us is an individual. Okay, so I think we'll take a little break here. So the ladies made some coffee, and there's water, and then there's some pastries and some cakes too. So we'll just take a little break here, and then I passed out that reader book. We'll go through a cursory look at the table of contents, and then we'll just go through one chapter, and we'll call it a night, okay? But we'll have like a little 10-minute break here, and then come back and we'll jump into the RCIA program for the year.